Hello. Welcome to Princeton University Concerts Live Q&A with Sheku and Isata Kanneh-Mason. I'm Dasha Koltunyuk, the series outreach manager, and it is truly thrilling to reach out to such an international crowd today. I believe we span almost all 7 continents. Before I bring the guest of honor into this stream, I just have a few housekeeping items. First, I'd like to thank everyone who pre-submitted questions in advance of today's conversation. You are quite the enthusiastic bunch. I have a special shout out to our youngest audience members who submitted questions: 5-year-old Oliver from California, 9-year-old violist Addison from Washington, D.C., and 9-year-old cellist Stefan from North London. I will try to incorporate as many of all of your questions as possible. And we have a few super fans who are joining our broadcast to ask their questions live on camera. You, our wonderful audience, can also submit your questions throughout the broadcast through the chat function on YouTube or through the comments on Facebook, depending on where you're watching. We love to make this conversation as interactive as possible. And so, Sheku, Isata, let's bring you in. Hi, guys. Thank you so much for joining us and for inviting us into your home for such an incredible recital. It's really great to have you. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who burst into a standing ovation after that rousing Rachmaninoff finale. I wish you could hear all of our applause. I know that sonata is one of your favorite shared works. Sheku, you included the Andante movement performed by Rostropovich and Horowitz, I believed, on the playlist that you curated for us for our collective listening project. And Isata, you included a lot of Rachmaninoff in your curated playlist as well. And one of the pre-submitted questions that we received was from Florida, from Shampa. She was curious about the musicians and composers who most inspire you, and it's clear that Rachmaninoff is one of those influences. So what is it about Rachmaninoff's music that you both love?
Yeah, I think you could probably...
Yeah, I mean, I think we both kind of got into him in different ways and maybe like him for slightly different reasons. So for me, my connection to Rachmaninoff started very young. He was one of the first composers I can consciously remember loving. And I used to listen to his second piano concerto over and over again from the age of about 5 or 6. And that was one of the main reasons I wanted to play the piano. So I have a very childhood connection with him. And then also because he was such a wonderful pianist himself, I love listening to his piano recordings and playing his many pieces written for piano. So that's my connection to Rachmaninoff.
Yeah, I mean, similar. I just love the harmonies and the melodies. I think he writes so wonderfully, of course, for the piano, but also in this cello and piano sonata, he really allows all of the richness and beauty of the cello to really come out in such a really in such an amazing way, because the combination of cello and piano is, of course, very, very difficult to write for balance-wise. And although the piano writing that he writes is very complex and there's loads of lines, somehow you hear all of those voices, and I think that's it's very, very impressive that he's able to write for these 2 instruments like that.
Oh, absolutely. And Sheku, I loved how you mentioned that you hear a symphonic range of emotions in Rachmaninoff's music. And there's a wonderful quote from Rachmaninoff where he said that new music seems to create not from the heart, but from the head. Its composers think rather than feel. They have not the capacity to make their works exalt. They meditate, protest, analyze, reason, calculate, and brood, but they do not exalt. You, of course, certainly exalt as you play in everything you do, and especially in that Rachmaninoff. Do you find that statement resonant?
Yeah, I think our job as musicians is definitely to kind of interpret what the composer has written and then kind of express it in our own way. So of course we want to be always true to the composer and what they were thinking and feeling, but we can't ever be fully inside their head and know 100%. So then we have to have our own interpretation as well, and then make it our own in a way.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting with Rachmaninoff, there are so many recordings of him playing his own music, and that's wonderful to see and to hear. I think what's most special about his playing is the range and the spontaneity of what comes out, and I think that's something that has inspired the way I approach his music from listening to how he plays it.
That certainly comes across, and We actually have a related question from one of your super fans who's waiting patiently backstage to come into the broadcast. So Mariana Olaizola is joining us from Berkeley, California. Mariana, welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Isata and Sheku, thank you so much for your concert, your music. It brought me to tears for most of the Rachmaninoff, as you can see my poofy eyes. Very interesting. The last question about the intellectual versus emotional. But anyway, my question was something also a bit abstract and something I've been thinking about given the times we're living through. So I was wondering, do you feel that aspects of and events in your life outside of music significantly impact how you approach a piece of music or even just sound at any given time? Yeah. Another way to ask, have you sensed that your the way you experience or play music is informed by what you're living through or have lived through? Or do you feel that your relationship to music exists somehow apart?
Yeah, I think this is something I think about a lot as well. And I think music is very special in that it's a wonderful way of making sense of things that we experience in real life and expressing that. But it's also an amazing escape from that as well. And so I think, yeah, it can do both. It can do both, express and explain things that we experience in real life, but also expand our imagination and make us feel things that we maybe haven't felt and don't feel in real life. And that's why I've always been drawn to music, and that's why I find it so it has such a unique impact on each individual person. And so that's what's really, really special.
Yeah, and I think also sometimes you come across a piece of music that may be expressing things that you haven't experienced, but then you kind of get into the shoes of another person and try and express their feelings. So I think, yeah, definitely what Sheku said, your own life impacts how you play the music, but I think other people's lives can also impact how you play music, even if it's not your life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, that absolutely makes sense. And do you feel that this time of pandemic has influenced that sensation all the more? Or how has this time changed your relationship with music and with playing chamber music in particular, with each other perhaps?
I think this time certainly has made me really appreciate the moments where we are able to share music with an audience in person. And that's something that I really, really miss. But I'm also really, really grateful that we are able to, like today, share music to people all around the world and come together to share that experience. And that's really, really special. And so that's something also I hadn't done much of, something like this. And so it's been a really, really new experience for me, for us in that sense.
Yeah, I was very amazed to see people writing in from all over, from Brazil, from Ireland, which I guess to you is much closer, but of course from us it's all the way across the sea. One topic that was broached during our last watch party with the Taka String Quartet was actually how difficult they found it to be creative, especially at the start of the pandemic and the shock of the pandemic. And Lorraine from Birmingham wrote in to say that for her, she's found it hard to focus on her music making and to practice during the pandemic and lockdown. What advice would you give to creative people who are similarly struggling right now?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had low points, particularly in the beginning. I think it's obviously very difficult when the world outside is so uncertain. And I think the key is actually with creativity. I think you can take anything and use it to fuel your creativity. So if, for example, if you're feeling low or anxious or sad about the pandemic, I often find that I then try and use that and try and put that into my music, and then the inspiration comes afterwards. Whereas it's very easy to kind of feel low and not feel like practicing, which I definitely had towards the beginning, and just sit back and wait for the inspiration to come before you take action. But I think if instead you kind of use those feelings and just play anyway, even if you're feeling low, I think you might find that the inspiration comes and that actually gives something to the music.
So do you find this is a question that came in from Cindy? Have you actually been more creative during the pandemic?
Yeah, exactly. So I think after initial low periods when we were, of course, shocked by what was happening and cancelled concerts, I think after that period, then I actually definitely became more creative, and there was also just more time and space to kind of be creative in a way that you may not have been before. So I think that can definitely come for everyone.
We've been calling that COVID gifts on our side of things. And actually, our director, Marna, has often referred to your recital as a COVID gift, as something that might not otherwise have happened right now. What have been some of your own COVID gifts?
For me, I would say having lots more time to just practice for things that aren't practicing not specifically for performances, but just practicing for myself, and that's something that I haven't had so much time in recent years, and so that has been nice. Just kind of getting back to basics and learning some studies and scales and pieces of repertoire that I'm not planning to perform. That's a real luxury, and I've got more back into. I used to do a lot of sketching when I was younger, and recently I've been doing a lot of that, which has been nice, and I wouldn't have thought to do it in the normal kind of busy life.
Yeah, I would say the same. First of all, lots of time to learn pieces just for the sake of it rather than learning for a deadline has been nice. And then, yeah, also just spending more time on other creative things outside of music that you normally wouldn't do because you're thinking, oh, I'm so busy, I haven't got time to do this. So I think that's been some of our gifts.
Absolutely. And one thing that we've noticed that a sort of COVID gift has been to see more and more musicians choosing to play only select movements from larger works. And so we have a question about that from one of my all-time favorite Princeton University professors, Olga Hasty. Olga, would you like to join us?
I first want to start by thanking you so much. I don't know when during this pandemic or even before I've been more deeply moved. I feel I just really needed that so much. Thank you for this excellent performance. The question that I guess Dasha was referring to is I was interested in, I enjoyed hearing your comments on how you put this performance together, how you select your pieces. But then within this, I want to ask about going back to the Beethoven, and you chose to play the first movement. And I wondered if you could comment on how different it would be to hear it as not just a standalone movement, but as the entire piece, or if you'd chosen to perform the second movement and not the first. How different that would be for you to play or for us to hear. And
yeah, definitely with the Beethoven sonata, it's actually one of my favorite pieces because of how amazingly he develops the first 5 notes into a whole, the first kind of 5-6 notes into a whole sonata. So the first da 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 is developed into so many different ways and twisted upside down and inside out, and that happens across the whole sonata. So all of the movements, and so as a journey of a whole sonata, it's actually a very really satisfying and enjoyable piece to listen to. But it also, I think it also works. If you split the movements up, of course, you don't get the feeling of how far he develops that one theme. So I would recommend, of course, listening to the whole sonata, and we would, if we had more time, of course, include the whole sonata. It's amazing. It's an amazing piece because of how extensively he develops that one theme. And there are lots of examples of sonatas that do that, and they're some of my favorite pieces.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you. It was a wonderful choice. I'm certainly not complaining. It's just
it's great. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
No, there's definitely such a lovely sense of intimacy and focus and almost informality that playing a single movement has, and especially from a house concert. So I was curious, what impact does performing from home have? And Isata, I imagine that being able to perform on a familiar piano is a welcome sensation. Are there other aspects of performing from home that you both enjoy?
Well, so I think Well, if I talk about house concerts in general, so not just performing from our home, but performing at other people's homes, I really enjoy because of the kind of intimacy you get with the setting, kind of feeling close to the audience, and you feel more relaxed because you're in a house. And I personally really enjoy house concerts. In terms of performing from our actual home, I would say the same thing in terms of you definitely feel very relaxed because you're in your home, and that creates an intimate setting. I wouldn't say that the piano is a factor. We have an okay piano, but it's not kind of the best piano in the world. So I wouldn't specifically want to perform at home for the piano. But I think the atmosphere you get from being at home or from being at a house concert in general is kind of an atmosphere that I think really suits music more than a concert hall in many ways. Of course, a concert hall is also fantastic, and we miss them. But yeah.
Rumor has it actually that Isata, you have several pianos in your family home. Do you want to say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so we're lucky enough to have we have 4 pianos, but 2 of them are in the same room, so 3 people can practice at the same time, and that's just because 3 of us are first study pianists, and everyone else also plays the piano in some shape or form. So just having one piano would just be too much in demand. So we had to have a few, but because of that, we don't have a particularly amazing piano, but they're definitely good enough for practicing and for playing at home. And yeah.
There's a lot of curiosity about your instruments from our audience. Can you tell us a bit more about your cello and your piano?
Yes, the cello I play on is an Amati, which was made in 1610, so it's just over 400 years old, and it's a wonderful instrument made in Italy, and I love performing on it and exploring all of the colours that it has, and it's very, very suited to, I guess, my style and what I want to get out of the music, and so I love performing on that instrument.
Yeah, and the piano I was playing on is a Petrov piano, and actually my parents bought it very recently. They bought it kind of this summer, because before that we didn't have a proper grand piano. So it's lovely to have kind of the first proper family home grand piano, and myself and my siblings have been enjoying kind of getting to know the piano more and more.
I relate to that so much. You're talking to someone who used to sleep under her piano, to the great concern of her mother. But as someone who has a whole family of musicians, are there similarly musically nerdy activities that you do that you'd care to share?
Yeah, I have to have a think actually, because we haven't done anything as exciting as sleeping under the piano. I think the nerdiest things that we tend to do as a family would revolve around kind of sometimes we play this game called Guess the Piece. If we're all sitting around the table, and you basically Sheku's embarrassed maybe that I'm sharing this, but you basically tap a rhythm onto the table with your fingers, and someone has to guess what piece it is just from hearing the rhythm, and the first person to guess wins and then gets to carry on. So that's kind of a nerdy thing we might do if we're just kind of sitting around the table. I don't know if you can think of anything else. That's probably the worst.
No, I love that so much. I'm so excited to try out that game. Thank you. We have a question from Rachel Katz, who wrote, "What do you enjoy most about making music with your family, and do you feel extra pressure about it?"
There's definitely no pressure. It's really, really nice being able to play with people you know well, and in fact, anyone that I know very, very well. It's a really special feeling because, of course, there's things that you maybe don't have to discuss in words. And I know Isata's playing, because we've played a lot together. I know Isata's playing very, very well, and she knows my playing, and so it means that rehearsals are easy, and we're also able to much easier gain a collective understanding and feeling for the piece.
Yeah, and in a way it's also less pressure when you go on the stage, especially if there's a few of us, because we all trust each other as musicians, so you get the sense that everyone could kind of hold their own, and if something goes wrong, like, we kind of have each other's back. And I also just enjoy rehearsing with them, because as Sheku was saying, there are many things that don't need to be said, and we get on well, so the rehearsals are always very
and it's
productive.
also easier to say things.
Yeah, if you need to criticize, you can. Yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating. And just, I think a lot of people have this question. I'm sure I've been asked it a million times, but a family with 7 siblings, all of whom are crazy talented musicians, how does that happen?
Well, my parents actually never, because it was never kind of a grand plan. I think my parents love music. They played it all the time growing up. So it was always part of the culture of the house. And then I started lessons first, and Brian and Sheku, Brian was our other brother, and Sheku followed very soon after. So by the time my sisters kind of hit the ages of 5 and 6, there were already 3 musicians in the house, and then it kind of just becomes a knock-on effect from there. And then add in, music always being on the CD player, and the whole house just naturally evolved that way.
Absolutely. In our house, the classical music radio always plays 24/7. And whenever I call my mom at home, I still hear it in the background, and it's a very reassuring thing.
That's really nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So one question that we got is from Bonnie in New Jersey, who asked if you have any advice for families who want to cultivate musical talent in their children.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the biggest thing is, start off by always having music playing, because as I was saying, that really just kind of, if you have a CD player or whatever, just have pieces of music playing and get your children used to just listening to music and music being around. And then after a few years of that, once they're at the right ages, then just start off with lessons after that. Yeah.
I wonder if it's not always perhaps the most easy to find a way for all 7 of you to practice at the same time. We got a few questions about that. How do you schedule practice time with 7 musicians? And do you ever fight to make sure you get to practice?
Well, I think, for me, I can just practice in my bedroom and kind of in whatever corner the cello fits. Of course, the pianists have to practice where the pianos are. And so they're always, they have like a rota of who practices on the best piano and when and stuff. But I just practice, wherever I can. And you do have to get used to the noise of someone else practicing next door, but it's quite easy once you get used to it to just focus on your own playing and your own sound and kind of block out the noise from next door.
Yeah, and there's no fights for time. I mean, as Sheku was saying, we have to schedule which piano, but we can all 7 of us practice at the same time. So you're never in a stress. You know that at whatever hour of the day that you want to practice, you can practice.
That we actually have a related question from one of your other super fans who's backstage, Sydney Taylor, who has a question about that.
Hi, Sheku and Isata.
Hi.
I really enjoyed your performance. Particularly the Swan is one of my favorite works. And we all know you have an incredibly talented and musical family. I'm curious about how difficult was it sort of like finding your own voice and style while having other siblings who are also incredibly talented, and what has been your journey in discovering your own sounds, and what have been your sources of inspiration along that journey?
Yeah, I think all 7 of us have very, very different, although we get on really, really well, we all have very, very different personalities as well. And I think that often comes out when we play and comes out just in general life. And I think it's really, really nice, of course, we're inspired by each other, but also are following our own paths and stuff. And that's really nice.
Yeah, and I think it also helped that we play different instruments. So, the order is piano, violin, cello, and then the next pianist is a few years below. So I think that also helped in the sense that there were never really too many people playing the same instrument at the same age, trying to do the same thing. That also helped with finding our individual voices.
Thank you so much. And I also like to say before I leave, I love your rendition of Redemption Song by Bob Marley, just quickly.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad you like it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
So it's really, really fascinating to all of us. And I was very moved in the Rachmaninoff, Sheku, when you turned around to just listen to Isata playing that beautiful second theme in the first movement and the piano solo, and you just sat there and listened. It was so moving. And that kind of moment is intimate, I think, for any duo. Do you find that Isata being your sister amplifies or impacts how you relate to your chamber partner, and Isata the same for you as well?
Yeah, I think it's definitely the thing of I know Isata's playing more than any other pianist, probably, because I hear her practice and I hear her play, and we play a lot together as well. And so it's really, really nice when you know someone's playing that well and also are able to therefore feel and notice the differences and the spontaneity that is coming out when we're performing. And I love that bit in the first movement of the Rachmaninoff, because it's one of my favorite themes, and to just sit back and listen to that and then have to answer it on the cello is really, really nice. And that kind of feeling of responding to what someone has said, of course, is easier when you know the person really, really well.
Yeah, and I would say the same thing. I've definitely played with Sheku more than any other string player, so I'm very used to his style of playing, and that's nice because there's a feeling during performance that any kind of risks can be taken, and you know the other person can follow and can handle it, so that kind of gives a sense of freedom.
It's so beautiful. I have it running through my head now, in fact. Do you think that special connection helps you stay in sync without facing each other? That was one question that was asked by our viewers.
Yeah, I think in sync is only really something you have to think about at the start, and then maybe at kind of big change moments or big chord moments. And in those kind of moments, Sheku will just turn around and face me, or I will look, because I can see Sheku at all times. So often I will just look at Sheku, and Sheku just trusts that I'm there. And
But I also think that, like, I guess being in sync or ensemble playing also comes if you have a unified kind of intention and feeling for things, then generally actual like timings and playing things together is kind of less
conscious,
less important maybe.
Less important. It doesn't have to be exactly together all the time, as long
the
as
intention and the conversation is together.
Yeah.
You feel that you're together and you trust that you're together, and it's beyond seeing each other.
Yeah. Maybe the audience doesn't think we're together, but we think we are.
No, not at all. That was one of the things that was so amazing. So many comments were of just how connected you two were. So earlier this month, you released your first family album, Carnival of the Animals, which includes this one that you played today.
Yeah.
As I understand it, it features all 7 of you in collaboration with Academy Award-winning actor Olivia Colman and children's author Michael Porpurgo. Can you say a little bit more about the project?
Yeah, so we wanted to create this album because, so the album's basically very aimed at children. People of all ages can listen to it and enjoy it. But basically, when we grew up with an album called Peter and the Wolf by Prokofiev, and that album has story and music intertwined, and that was one of our favorite childhood albums. And really, so we wanted to create something similar. So the album that we just made has Carnival of the Animals, and then Michael Morpurgo wrote poems to fit each animal, and him and Olivia Colman narrated. So the whole album has music and story, and hopefully that will appeal to children, and also kind of adds another dimension to the music and makes the whole thing more visual. So we really enjoyed doing that.
When you perform or when you play music, is it a visual experience for you? Do you hear a narrative? Do you sense a story?
Yeah, different things. Sometimes we have like a story or an image. For example, in the second movement of the Rachmaninoff, we have a very vivid, detailed story with words and things like that. Sometimes it's just the music. The music and the feeling, and sometimes it's more specific and sometimes it's less. But I think music definitely conjures up a feeling or an image or a picture or a story or something if you have a connection with it.
What's the picture that you see when you play the Swan? And I know that on the album you play a little bit of a different arrangement, but has your playing of the Swan changed through the years? That's a question we received from Aditi.
It's a piece that I'm sure a lot of cellists have grown up playing, and I've played a lot, and I think it's really, really beautiful. And the image I always have is of the kind of sereneness of this swan, and you have the piano creating this amazing water on which you just float, and that's a really, really nice feeling.
Yeah, and that's the nice thing about Carnival of the Animals, because he's named each movement after an animal. You're already halfway there with the image.
Oh, absolutely. And I noticed, Isata, that before you started the piece, you hesitated very slightly. And I wonder, is it because it's actually such a difficult beginning to just get into that rolling piano part that seems to have already started before you actually play?
Actually, yeah, it's funny because with these really simple, because the swan is a very simple piano part technically, but with these really simple piano parts, when you want to create a really specific atmosphere, I do have to kind of pause before and really kind of, well, with the swan, actually, I try to play the first bar in my head a couple of times so that when I start playing, I feel like I was already playing. It's quite hard to describe, but because it's such a continuous water-like motion, you don't want to kind of start with a bump. So I try to kind of be playing in my head and then join. That's the best way I can describe the beginning of that piece.
Absolutely. We got a note from Christian from Staffordshire, who wrote in to say that he absolutely loved the album and the recital, and was wondering if you're planning any more family performances or projects in the near future.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's hard to, there's nothing specific that I can give you now, unfortunately, just because things are so uncertain, but there'll definitely be family concerts which will pop up, I'm sure, over the next few months. And yeah, I mean, our big, that's all I could say at the moment, actually, because our biggest family project was this album, which is now behind us, but hopefully we'll do some more concerts where we perform, pieces together.
Oh, absolutely. Fair enough. Sheku, I guess that you can say this project was your second encounter with royalty. Olivia Colman is currently making a splash playing Queen Elizabeth in the Netflix series The Crown, which I've been watching very with great devotion. But Sheku, you also got to experience the real deal when you performed at the royal wedding of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle in 2018. So I'll bring in our last broadcast participant, Colin Thompson, to ask a bit about that.
Hello. Yes, Sheku, I first became so interested in the Kanneh-Masons when I seen your video and YouTube recommendations. You were performing for the royal wedding. So I've been wondering ever since then, like, what was your first reaction to being invited to perform at such an occasion?
Yeah, it was definitely a surprise. I wasn't expecting to be asked to perform at an event like that. And it's very, very different to, I guess, what I'm used to and the settings that I'm used to, and the events that I'm used to performing at. And so I was just very, very, very excited. I had to keep it a secret that I was performing there for quite a few months, which was tricky. But it was just really, really exciting and an honor to have been asked, and the opportunity to perform in front of not just so many people there, but also so many people watching from TV and stuff was really, really exciting and really cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, Colin. No, I think it was something like 35 million people tuned in to, as you were playing, which is rare for a classical musician to play for so many people at one time. So how do you relate to the audience, especially such a large audience, as you play and as you perform for more and more people?
Yeah, I think of performance as you're sharing this special feeling and relationship you have with the music, with an audience. And for me, it's just as special when it's one person as hundreds and thousands and etc. I think it's just, we feel very lucky as musicians to be able to share something as special as music with an audience. And that's where music comes alive as well. And so it's a really powerful and special feeling being able to perform.
Isata, I remember that when you visited with students at the Trenton schools a few weeks ago, one thing you mentioned was that you actually prefer smaller audiences, that there's more of a sense of connection. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not that I prefer small audiences, because I think, all audiences, you get something different. But I think what you do get from a small audience, which I do prefer, is kind of, I mean, I think it's more about how close you are to the audience physically. So if it's a small audience, you're likely to be in a smaller venue, and therefore you're likely to be close to the audience. I think sometimes it's difficult if it's a very big audience. It's likely to be a very big hall, and therefore I'm very aware that there are some people way at the back who may have less of a connection just because of the distance. Whereas with a small audience, it feels very much like I feel like everyone's enveloped with the music. But even if it's a big audience, I always try to just play to everyone in the room and hope that the music still reaches them, even if they're far away.
It absolutely does. You succeeded that so beautifully. As young musicians with such an expansive and excited fan base, and also as members of the generation of so-called influencers, how do you want to shape the future of classical music?
Ooh, big question.
Good question.
I mean, I don't know about the whole future of classical music, but in terms of like small current goals, I think for us, we're always just really excited when we see more and more people getting into classical music. I love when people come to my concerts or one of our concerts and say, "Oh, this is my first classical concert." I love seeing young people taking up an instrument for the first time, and I think that kind of supports our aim to have more people and more types of people getting into classical music. And that would be my aim. And also for classical music to be more accessible to more people. So for it to be more present in schools, and for more people to feel like a classical concert is something they can just come to, rather than feeling like it's only for certain people.
Absolutely. In fact, we have a few very young audience members here, so you're already succeeding in that. Amaya, who's 7 years old and a violinist, is asking, how many hours a day do you practice?
Well, it varies from age to age. I mean, when I was 6 and 7 and just starting, I think it would vary. I think I would practice my pieces for my teacher for about 15 minutes, and then I would kind of just like compose and mess around on the piano for like a further like half an hour or however long I wanted, and just enjoy it. Basically, it's more about enjoying it and the quality rather than the hours. And then I think when I got to about 9, I started doing 1 or 2 hours a day, and then in my teen years kind of went up to 3 or 4, and then 5 or 6 like when I got older.
I'm still in the 3 or 4 stage. But yeah, as Esther says, of course, the quality is really important, and being able to really focus and have a goal every time you're practicing is something that takes time to learn, but it makes it worth it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I love that, just having fun with it, especially at the beginning. We have a question from Amy, who's a beginning cellist, and is asking, do you have any other tips for starting specifically on the cello and making time to practice?
I mean, there are lots of things with starting the cello. I think making time to practice, my dad would always say that there are 24 hours in the day, and therefore, X number of hours you can assign to this if you're really balanced with time. And it is true if you are really organized and balance your time well, you do find actually that there are many more hours in the day than you expected, and so that's very,
even
very
if
true.
you put aside a whole hour for practicing the cello, and then you have like 8 hours to sleep or something, and you'd still, aside from school, have many hours for free time.
But I mean, tips for starting the cello, I mean, that just depends.
No, of course. And I think it's wonderful advice to create balance. We received several questions from young aspiring musicians who asked about how you managed to balance your academic work and your musical pursuits. But I'd also love to know how you managed to balance your professional careers with your personal lives. So what did an average day look like when you were in grade school, and what does an average day look like these days?
I think like the higher up in the school, as in the closer I got to the point of realizing that cello is definitely what I wanted to do, the less kind of attention I paid to do my schoolwork. But I always found that I did really have time to balance my schoolwork and like homework and stuff with practice if I was organized. Of course, there was a point where I cared maybe less about my schoolwork because I was really, really sure that cello was what I wanted to do. But I think, yeah, you can always find the balance somehow.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just have to make, because we'd be home from school at about 4 o'clock and probably be up until around 9. And so in that time, we might practice 2 or 3 hours, and then you might spare an hour for homework, or you might do homework just like a couple of nights a week. I mean, I remember doing homework on a Wednesday evening and then not at all any other evening. But I think you basically, as Sheku was saying, you have to make a decision about what you love most, and then you have to kind of prioritize things and have a hierarchy, because you can't do everything. You can't give everything to everything, basically. You can do your schoolwork, but you can't spend hours revising a subject and hours practicing. So you have to decide.
I feel like that's such an important just life lesson in general, no matter what we do.
Yeah.
So one really interesting question we received from Sally from North London was, what were the difficulties and obstacles on your journey to becoming professional musicians? And as well as your amazingly supportive family, what else was key in helping your success unfold?
I think most of the obstacles that I faced would come from myself. So I think if you're lucky enough to have supportive teachers and supportive people around you, and you work very hard and kind of are very proactive with going for opportunities, then I think, you really can become the musician you want to be. And so the boundaries that I actually faced is with my own self, moments of self-doubt or moments of lack of motivation. Maybe you don't feel like practicing for a period of time. And I think those are actually the most difficult things to overcome. So I think it's always best to kind of look within yourself and kind of overcome those boundaries, and then the external stuff becomes much easier.
Yeah, I think probably similar. And I think one of the big things I had to learn is being able to focus on one thing for a long period of time, and learning how to focus. Because of course, I mean, especially when I was younger, I would get distracted with lots of different things, and I loved football, I loved all these other things, and being able to focus and balance my time was something that was a big challenge just because of my personality. But of course, I've seen how worth it was, and now I find that much easier as I'm older. But I think having the support and having great teachers was definitely helped me.
Oh yeah, because the second part was what helped. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Teachers and also generosity in terms of, because music can be very expensive, and we had generosity in terms of funding and people being generous with their time, and teachers. And I think, we had supportive people around us.
And I loved also what you said about looking within and finding that motivation. Are there things that you've turned to that you found have helped motivate you? And in general, what motivates you to strive for the mastery of your art?
Yeah, I think for me, sometimes if I'm feeling stuck, either I try to be creative in other ways outside of music. So if I really feel like I can't practice, I'll try to do something else creative, or just spend time with people, or go outside and do some sports, or like anything. And then also another way to do it is if I go to a concert or watch someone on YouTube or listen to music, that is also a big inspiration, because it kind of kicks you and makes you want to.
Yeah, I've definitely learned so much, and have been inspired over the years by listening to recordings and watching videos. And I think it's so we're very lucky that it's so easy to access so many amazing recordings of current amazing performers, but also performers of the past as well. And I would always encourage people to listen to and watch as much of that as possible, because you can learn so much from a recording, and it's very, very easy to do these days.
Absolutely. And I just encourage everyone who's listening to listen to Sheku and Isata's curated playlists with their own recommendations of things to listen to and their thoughts on those pieces, available on our website. Isata, you mentioned that you like to do some physical activity to help balance with and find that motivation. And one question we received was, do you have a specific physical exercise regimen that helps prevent injury from playing for long hours?
Yeah, I mean, so the biggest thing for me is stretching. I mean, I love running, I love walking, I love dancing and just being outside. But if you practice and then just run and do all those things, that still doesn't help. Running doesn't necessarily help to relieve tension. So I stretch a lot and I stretch every day. And that's the biggest thing in terms of preventing injury, I would say.
I think that's definitely true. And also being conscious of how you play and where the tension can possibly come from in your playing. Me as a cellist, how I sit and sitting on the right height chair, and all of the things technically that you want to ensure that means that you can have minimal tension and be able to play and perform a lot without getting injuries. I think a lot comes from the technique and the setup and how you sit, etc. It's really important. And if you do feel you have a pain, to address it as soon as possible, as opposed to fighting on. There's no shame in being injured and addressing it. It's really important to not be proud and ignore it.
Yeah, and especially if you're in the early stages of learning an instrument, it's better to be really aware of your setup and your technique and how you sit as early as possible, because it's much easier to create good habits earlier on than it is to change habits later on. Of course you can, but it's just easier to not have to.
That's excellent advice. And I hope that helps create a long career ahead for you guys. So one question that we received is, what ambitions, if any, have you not yet fulfilled?
Well, I'd still like to record some Rachmaninoff, particularly the piano concertos, because they got me into playing. So that hasn't been fulfilled yet. So that's probably that's what comes to mind for me.
I mean, there are lots of pieces I want to perform and places I would like to perform as well. I'm not sure.
Do you have anything specific?
Yeah, it's just a general. I just love performing, and I would like to start my own festival at some point. I think that would be really nice, and be able to create my own projects and stuff. So that's maybe a goal.
Interesting. Oh, I hope that all of that happens. So it's been really fascinating speaking with you both and listening to you, of course. Our live Q&A with the Takash Quartet last month ended with an intriguing discovery that violinist Harumi Rhodes has a peculiar fascination with eating soup. So I'd love to keep this tradition going. 2 very serious last questions. What are your favorite types of soup? And what is one surprising fact about each of you that the world might not yet know?
I made this really nice sweet corn soup the other day. Actually, like most of my lunches, I have soup, so I actually quite like it as well. It's just very like easy to make and to eat. And so, but I liked the sweet corn one I made the other day.
I'm going to be quite controversial and say I'm not actually the biggest soup fan. I mean, I enjoy a soup, but I don't know. I find it takes a long time to eat. But if I had to choose my favorite soup, I'd probably go for a classic tomato soup.
If you had to choose a different food entirely? Different food than soup?
Oh, my favorite food is always rice-based. I eat rice every day with everything. So anything with rice, I'm happy.
Oh yeah.
Let me think. I don't know. I mean, I think the world doesn't know that I'm obsessed with rice. You know that I'm obsessed with rice, and that's actually. I really want to give an interesting fact, but it's very difficult.
It's hard to know what's interesting about yourself.
Sometimes I read while I'm practicing. So if I'm doing my scales or if I'm practicing something one-handed, I will have a book in the other hand, and I'll read my book and I'll play the piano with one hand. And that's been a thing since I was a child, and I used to get told off for it, but now I do.
Taking multitasking to a whole nother level.
I would say I love rap music and rapping as well. So I come up with, I mean, it's nothing I would share with the world, but I do like make my own beats and rap and stuff, and that's something I enjoy. But it's something you will never hear.
Well, one more direct question is just about your beautiful names. A question that we got from one of our listeners: where do your names come from? Do they have special meaning?
Yeah, so they both come from Sierra Leone, and specifically their Mende names, which is where our mum's dad's family are from Sierra Leone, and Mende is the language they speak. And Sheku means prince, and it comes from the Muslim word sheikh. And Isata, actually don't know.
Yeah, and Isa comes from Aisha, and it means source of life.
Wow, that's so beautiful. Well, I think there's probably no more beautiful way to end our conversation. You've been so kind and generous to let us get to know you on such a personal level. Thank you for your artistry, for your passion, for taking the time to play for and speak with us. And we hope that we'll be able to hear you perform live, pretty please, in the not too distant future. Thanks as well to my fantastic colleagues who have been hard at work behind the scenes putting this all together, and to all of you listeners who have tuned in for choosing to spend your Sunday with us. We look forward to joining you again soon for the continuation of our digital programming, which we'll announce on our website and through our email communications. So please visit PrincetonUniversityConcerts.org to make sure you're signed up for our email list. And while you're there, please consider making a tax-deductible donation to help make future programs like this possible. We're committed to offering our digital programming free of charge, but the programming is not free from cost for us, and we need your help in order to continue to connect you with exceptional musicians like Sheku and Isata. So thank you so much again. We're truly grateful for your being with us, for everyone coming together at this moment. Stay safe out there and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.